work is hard enough. Slogging through bad emails, slogging through bad PowerPoints. We just have to stop doing this to people, and we have to stop doing it to ourselves. No one wants to lead bad webinars, and definitely no one wants to sit through them.
Hello, healthcare. We are at HMPS 2021, and we're excited to bring these themes to you through our YouTube channel. So some of the topics that we've seen discussed here are around consumerism and the consumer experience, digital transformation, patient engagement. But when you're sitting down here, you're looking at all these conference topics, how do we synthesize that? How do we get this together in a way that gets our leadership to understand some of the changes and some of the innovations that we want to make? Well, we brought the absolute best person to speak to us on that, Debra Jasper, who is founder and CEO of Mindset Digital. And what she's done, I actually had the pleasure of seeing her presentation, but what she's done is really synthesize a way to get communications across effectively in a way that drives change. Debra, could you just share a little background on what you've been doing?
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about how to make a big impact on a small screen, because now, of course, we're working in a hybrid world. And one of the things we talked about, of course, this morning is how do you make all of your content, whether it's a news release or an email or a webinar, everything has to be short, organized, skimmable, with a lot of clear calls to action, clear recommendations, clear context, because I sort of say boring doesn't work, it never did, but now it really doesn't work. People are just not tuning in the same way.
Excellent. That's a great preview to that whole conversation, and it gives you a little bit of a lens into what it takes. Short, organized, skimmable, SOS. I hope that's on the screen. But either way. So we talk about this challenge. We talked about small screen challenge. A lot of things that you were talking about were big screen challenges too. Even if you have a big screen and you have a bunch of small text, who's going to read it? Right. So the big question is, why is it such a challenge for, like, if you're trying to drive change and communicate with senior leadership, why is it such a challenge to get a message across to them?
Especially senior leadership, because I do a lot of keynotes for C-suite executives, and you think we're all distracted. They're hyper distracted, right? Everybody's so busy. We all have so much coming at us. And so one of the things we used to talk about is how today's audiences have 8-second attention spans, which is still true. But now people are not just distracted. I think the big challenge now is they're distant and they're distressed. And the brain science of this I find fascinating. The brain science basically says when we're stressed out, it's harder for us to listen, it's harder for us to learn, and it's harder for us to remember what we learned, which is why we go through a meeting and then we say, what was it that you were talking about? You know, we've got to, as leaders, we're going to have to communicate with extreme clarity and impact. Not just clarity, but extreme clarity if we have any hope that we're going to drive action.
Let's dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like we're trying to break through people who are distracted. There's all kinds of things going on, much more pressing matters. So what is extreme clarity? How do we, what's the basic concept around that?
So a lot of what's happening now is I talked today about the 3 W's. You have to start with what am I talking about? And you know, why does it matter? So what is this about? And you better be able to answer that in a sentence or two. So what? Why does my audience care? And now what? What do we want them to do next? And we all kind of know the self-interest rule. People care because, you know, what's in it for them. But too often we start our presentations and our emails and our reports with why we care instead of talking about why they care. Why does the audience care? So extreme clarity requires you to get to the heart of why people care fast.
But wait a minute, when I was in college, I was told that my papers, they had to be a minimum of 20 pages. You're telling me that was wrong?
So I teach graduate courses, actually, in public policy. I actually used to teach. I was usually students, I was kind of the last class before graduation, and I would say, now you're going to take that lovely thesis, and you are going to try to break it down. Not dumb it down, but break it down in a way that makes people want to read it. Because sometimes you think about all those college papers, and of course your professors read them because you paid them to. Now, when you're out here, people aren't, we're not tuning in unless you can make a compelling case for why we should.
Great, and that when you said break it down, not dumb it down.
Yeah.
I want everybody to know. Just because you've broken it down, you've communicated it more simply, you're not dumbing it down. You're not watering your message down, right?
Simple is hard. Right? And everybody always talks about the famous quote. People argue over who said it, but I love it. It is, I'm sorry I wrote you this long letter. If I'd had more time, I would have written you a shorter one. It's because it takes time to get down to what's most essential to share. And if you don't know why it's important, your audience really doesn't. So that's true if you're writing. I always say clear writing reflects clear thinking. But it's also true if you're presenting. If you put a lot of complexity on the screen, all that says to me is you haven't done the hard work of breaking it down and telling me why it matters.
And I've got to tell you, coming from the data science side of things, let's say it like this. It feels good to have done some really intense analysis and oh, here's the box plot and here's the other types of charts and things like that. It really feels good to go over all that explanation, but it sounds like we have to divorce ourselves from being proud of all this analysis and stuff that we've done and really get into what the audience is focused on, right?
Yeah, and so here's what's funny about that. So I was a journalist in another life, as I mentioned, and I was an investigative reporter, and I used to write long-form investigative projects. I once filled a dozen pages in the newspaper. So I love all that analysis, and I love long-form writing, and you bring out all this complex data. But the truth is, where we are now, with the audiences so distant, so distracted, so much going on, you think about everybody at home and their kids are talking and their dogs are barking and, there's just too much. We can choose to give them all that complexity, but if they don't read it or they don't take it in, it doesn't matter. So I say we can either be relevant or we can be reluctant, but we can't be both. We cannot be reluctant to adapt to this changing environment if we want to be relevant.
Well, I've got to say that. So you're even talking about having to adapt as well.
Did I adapt? Yeah.
There's so much stuff that we have to unlearn, and I'm wondering, your journey or the journey that you try to guide people down. How do you unlearn that kind of baked in?
So it's funny. So I launched. I was a writer, and I was teaching at Ohio State University, and in the John Glenn School, and I realized that we were teaching people how to write. And I said, I saw the handwriting on the wall and it wasn't handwriting anymore because my students were coming in and saying, no, we want to create YouTube videos and we want to tweet, So we launched the first social media fellowship for journalists in the world. And we were the first people to start teaching journalists. We were working with CNN and 60 Minutes and Chicago Tribune and LA Times. And we were talking about Twitter, which they hated. Journalists did not want to embrace Twitter early days. Mm-hmm. And we said, no, I think it's going to change the world. I should have written the book then because it totally changed the world. But you think about even the impact of Twitter and social and talk about getting down to what's most essential to share. You had to really get to what mattered in a sentence. And I think that's why people loved it so much, because it forced you to synthesize information. And now we've adapted to that. If you're spending your whole days, engaging in short messages, when all this complexity comes at you, what I always say is you go, I'll do that tomorrow, or it'll end up in your to-do Saturday pile, which becomes your to-do never pile.
Beautiful. And so earlier you brought up SOS, short, organized, skimmable. So that, I love little heuristics like that because it's that's something that I can, if I'm typing my email, I can just bring that back in my head. Yeah. What are some other little tips somebody watching this video could just take away and make sure that they're staying on course?
So we have a whole program on short, organized, skimmable. So we have entire micro courses because again, you can't teach people you can't teach people how to be short, organized, and skimmable with long meandering courses. But that one is critical. But we also you heard me talk about ARC, which is you have to have a clear call to action, clear recommendations, and clear context. And the context should be at the bottom. So you've got to start with what is that call to action. If you have more than one, I'm probably not tuning in. If you give me 5, then I just get paralyzed. We also talk, a lot of things that people find compelling though, is sometimes they'll say, Debra, you talk a lot about the power of the informal. That's why we say casual does not mean careless. People are resistant to being more informal because, to your point, business schools and all that, they teach you a lot. They teach you to elevate your language, but then you're into that curse of expertise, which is when you're talking to impress rather than inform. And we're not tuning into any of that. So you're over here kind of going, well, wah, 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 look how amazing my research is. And everybody else is like, wow, there's a cute new cat video on YouTube. So, and just going into that and the teachings that you've been able to do.
one thing that was really interesting about your presentation was you showed kind of the before and after on LinkedIn profiles and the before and after on emails that didn't need to be the Iliad, right?
I always say, a friend of ours, actually, I stole this from him, always says, you don't have time to write War and Peace, and I don't have time to read it. But yes, LinkedIn profile is the same thing, that formality. So often people want to get on LinkedIn and they want to write in their elevated language and they want to say, here's the thing. I didn't sit down today and say, hi, my name is Debra. Debra is a dynamic leader. We just don't do that. But somehow we go to LinkedIn and we write like that. And that is not building trust. So we have to think more about telling the powerful story of us, which goes back to why do people care, instead of starting with how long you've been in business, because if I don't know you, I really don't care. Instead of saying, Tom has been in business for 30 years, you want to start with what's in it for the people that you serve or the people that you work with. So I always say, we do LinkedIn makeovers for executives, and I start with this question, and it's a tough one. Don't tell me what you do. Tell me what you love about what you do for others. If you can't really answer that quickly, then you want to be you want to spend some time thinking through how to answer that question. But even then, that profile has to be short, organized, and skimmable, because I want to call you up on LinkedIn and look and get a quick look at what you do, but I don't want to read you don't need to tell me that you once interned at Kinko's. So people have to sort of get to the point, even in their LinkedIn profiles.
Absolutely. And I think that just talking with you and knowing the type of work that you do, this is probably something that's had a lot of impact on people's ability to grow in their careers.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's any particular person you remember or any kind of case like where there was bad communication style or there were too talky or what have you. Can you talk about kind of maybe a turnaround that's happened as a result of thinking this way?
Actually, yesterday, an association leader called me and said her LinkedIn profile was a game changer for her. So she just got a new job. And she's like, there's no way if my profile hadn't been good, I would have gotten this, big promotion. So she was super excited. But also we're in pain. None of us want to present in a way that you start watching people get on their phones. It's painful. We're in pain as speakers when we stand up in front of an audience and you just feel like, I've lost people. And when you put up visuals, at Mindset, we call it rapid visual storytelling. You can almost see people lean in. It's just so much more engaging. And when you get to clarity, like I'm going to give you 3 key things, people will start writing things down. So I had a guy call me a couple of weeks ago, and he just gave a talk with over 150 slides. It was his first time doing visual storytelling. And he was so excited. So here's what's really fun. None of us want to work is hard enough. Slogging through bad emails, slogging through bad PowerPoints. We just have to stop doing this to people. And we have to stop doing it to ourselves. No one wants to lead bad webinars, and definitely no one wants to sit through them. So I think the big challenge is getting people to invest the time it takes to become a powerful virtual communicator, but you're not going to have a choice. I've been evangelizing about this, I feel like, for a decade, but in the last year and a half, people have said, oh yeah, we have to do this and we've got to do it now. So it's kind of been, for me, it's been joyous to see people lean in finally and say, yeah, we're gonna embrace some new approaches.
I love that context too. You're not going to have a choice. There's so much out there. Like you're trying to get your webinar or your content out, but there's 20 minutes of prologue or prelogue, and
people reading to you.
Oof.
This is why I was saying people. I think their temptation on a small screen is, hey, look, I can look at the bottom and read to you. No, you can't. I am not. This is why I was saying earlier, right? If you read to your kids to put them to sleep. You cannot read to me in a webinar or in on stage either. But the temptation in a webinar is pretty strong, and people want to read those introductions, and then it gets awkward because you can never read in a way that flows. So there's just, being a powerful virtual communicator is the essential new skill. I call it a new basic.
No, absolutely no doubt on that. And for the people that are watching, like one reason we put this together is so that if you weren't able to attend HMPS and see rapid visual storytelling in action, you can at least get a little taste of that.
Sure.
For the folks that want to reach out, communicate, or have any kind of questions for you.
So mindsetdigital.com, they can go check out what we're doing. Or, of course, you should link into me. I always say my LinkedIn profile, you really spend the time on it when you teach people how to do powerful LinkedIn profiles. But my LinkedIn profile is Debra Jasper, Debra Jasper. And then I want to get messages from people. I always hear from people saying, here's what I did with my PowerPoint, or here's how I changed this, or, Sue Jablonski is speaking at 2:00 today from Ohio Health, and she's amazing. And she's going to have more than 100 slides, and she's doing a lot more rapid visual storytelling. And that's an example. She's like, in the old days, she's a chief marketing executive at Ohio Health. She said no more than 5 slides, no more than 10 slides. And now she's realized that visual storytelling matters. And people are going to remember what you said when I said today, say dog, see dog. If you're talking about a dog, you're going to show me a dog. If you're talking about whatever you're talking about, you need to show me on screen, and your impact will it goes up tremendously. So we all want to present with clarity and impact. We want to write with clarity and impact. We've got to learn how to do that, to your point. It doesn't come naturally.
I've got to say this, during the presentation, you told me that it was about 361 slides in about an hour, right?
It was 365 slides in about 50 minutes. Yeah.
50 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry for anybody who didn't get to see it live. I'm just curious, is there, people are probably watching this on YouTube, any place people can go on YouTube to see rapid visual storytelling in action?
Yeah. If you go to our website and you go to the keynote section, we do have a video there. But they typically we end up doing a lot of work with people where I coach executives on how to do this. I also, of course, I have a master class. It's really fun too. The master class is called Design for Attention, and we talk in the first section about how do you apply narrative. Then we talk about rapid visual storytelling, and then we talk about delivery. Because especially on a small screen, there's some tricks to actually delivering in a way that feels more natural. Because you know what it's like. You're on a webinar and you think, is there anyone out there? I mean, it's tough. So there's just a lot that goes into this. But we all went to school to learn how to be writers. We didn't learn how to do that overnight. So we're just going to have to be lifelong learners. We're going to have to go back and, rethink how we're doing everything. I will say one word about training, though, and I talked about this earlier, is we do gamified training. So you saw that we redesigned a bad curriculum in cybersecurity. You say cybersecurity training and people's eyes glaze over. But if you gamify it and you make people look like Vikings and you unlock rewards and all of that, it's way more fun. So we did that with patient satisfaction training, and the hospital tripled their patient satisfaction scores. I mean, they went way up because people wanted to take the training. It was fun. It's short bursts of learning. So everything we do, we've got to rethink. There's no doubt about it.
So, and we're at a conference talking about rethinking the types of experiences that we give to our patients. Now we have to rethink the way that we deliver and get our buy-in from our teams on that. So I strongly encourage folks to go out and look at this, look at what's been put together here.
Thanks.
And thanks for sharing your contact information and Mindset Digital. With that, I hope that you've appreciated this little slice of HMPS.
Yeah, it's been amazing. What an amazing conference. You're right. The topics have been incredible. The energy's been great. And just being back in a room with people is so much fun. So totally enjoyed it.
Thank you. And for the folks that couldn't join us at HMPS, or the folks that want a little bit more, we hope you've appreciated this talk with Debra.
Yeah.
If you want more of the latest from healthcare's thought leaders, subscribe using the button below, or you can visit hellohealthcare.com to get updates directly in your email.